So, I may have gotten yet another hyperfixation on a stupid piece of furry media. Even though I'm not even done with the Alancia videos yet, and I have other videos I want to make on stuff like the most recent Deltarune chapters, my brain wouldn't stop screaming at me until I dropped everything to make a video on this game. So here I am on my bullshit again. Shocking, I know. Let's just cut straight to the chase. Ever since I started college, I've been getting super into the world of tabletop RPGs, or as the less informed may know them, Dungeons & Dragons. For the past few years, my favorite has been Avatar Legends, made by Magpie Games using their take on the Powered by the Apocalypse system, and set in the universe of Avatar The Last Airbender. And make no mistake, that game is still absolutely fantastic, and has led to some of my favorite campaigns I've ever run. But then, earlier this year, something else released. Something that crept its way out from the shadows of the furry role-playing community, reaching out with a clawed, inhuman hand. The island of Dr. Moreau. Now, if you're able to match my level of freak, you might actually be familiar with the general concept of this game. That's because it's actually based on an old forum roleplay from way back in the early 2000s, hosted on Gaia Online, which has been reinterpreted time and time again as a source of inspiration in online transformation-adjacent spaces. Inspired by the H.G. Wells novel of the same name, and actually taking place on the same island more than a century later, the island of Dr. Moreau is a rules-light system focusing on a grand experiment ran by three doctors. Nicholas Moreau, great-grandson of the title doctor from the original novel, Saban Duvert, an extravagant investor with a flair for the theatrical, and Aubrey Lockhart, Moreau's fiancée and the public face of Feral Labs. A variety of human test subjects are lured to the titular island under false pretenses, whether that be as a simple island vacation, a promise to help turn their lives around, or as even just a straight-up kidnapping. Regardless, all of the islanders share one thing in common. Throughout the course of the next few months, and likely years, they will be slowly mutated by the doctors, transforming into human hybrids with a variety of animal features, becoming unrecognizable in the process. However, behind the scenes, things are not as unified as they seem. As the three head doctors bicker about how to proceed with the experiment, their own staff slowly fractures and cracks, helped in no small part by the variety of unstable and unsavory individuals in their employ, many of whom have their own motivations and schemes. And all the while, the islanders form cliques, relationships, and factions of their own, as they try to cope with what's befallen them, plan and attempt to escape the island, and slowly but surely lose control of their own bodies. It's only a matter of time before the experiment ends in catastrophe, slowly but surely reaching a boiling point. But the question is, what happens until then? That's the game's main premise. The fall of the island is inevitable, but what happens in the meantime? Well, when you stick a bunch of people on an island, create a high-stress situation by keeping them there against their will, and then throw unfamiliar animal instincts and bodies into the mix, what the hell do you think would happen? The game does lean more on the mature side because of this, and the themes lead to some really dark places. So this game contains a massive amount of content warnings just based on the subject matter. Body horror and dysphoria, a loss of autonomy, power dynamics and unhealthy relationships, potentially adult content if your GM decides to run it that way. So if you're not sure you're okay with the kind of subject matter this game presents, definitely talk to your GM about your concerns, or honestly, just don't engage with this particular game. But with that out of the way, I can finally get into what I think makes this game so damn special. My girlfriend and I purchased the physical and PDF bundle from Indie Press Revolution, and I gotta say, this is one of the nicest physical RPGs I've ever owned. An absolutely gorgeous hardcover, firm binding, and countless pages filled to the brim with stylish formatting, countless pieces of art from various artists in the online TF spaces. Oh, yeah, I suppose I should explain exactly what TF is if I'm going to keep using that abbreviation. TF is short for transformation, and it's largely a subset of the furry fandom focused on, well, exactly that, transformation. Usually from human into some kind of animal, though there's also a large portion that focuses on gender transformation as well. Naturally, that last bit is of particular interest to me, because in this house we stand for the flag. But TF has always been an important aspect of my adult life, with those communities actually playing a large part in helping me grapple with my own gender identity back when I was still questioning. Hell, it's even how I met my girlfriend. Plus, I mean, with the amount of movies, TV shows, books, and games that all use the idea of transformation as a narrative element, I was bound to latch onto this sort of thing growing up. I will acknowledge that for a lot of folks online, TF is primarily, let's just say, an adult interest, so if you decide you want to go poking around the internet to learn more, just be prepared for what you'll see. And if you are a minor watching this video, stop watching. I'm serious, go. This game is not for you. The Island of Dr. Moreau was created by Dr. Ulysses Duckler, or US Duct Tape on itch.io, the developer of a handful of other tabletop RPGs. Most notably to this discussion, though, is To Change, a roleplay-heavy system based around the concept of transformation. If you're looking for a more malleable system that can be applied to more general TF scenarios, I can't recommend this system enough, and certain aspects of the Island of Dr. Moreau were built off of it. Most notably, stuff we'll get into later, like the future deck, attribute tests, and characters being linked to a specific tarot card. The actual mechanics for describing the transformations are pretty different, though, compared to that game. Additional written contributions to the book came from some other creators in the TF space, specifically Arania, Marquis Orias, Ewan Albright, Darling Demon Eclipse, I Feel Odd, and Naomi Maratea. So the way the book is formatted is actually really interesting. See, there are two types of pages. These ones with the cream-colored backgrounds, which are available for any player in the game to look at any time, and the black pages, which are restricted information available only to Dr. Moreau, aka the player who acts in the most traditional GM-type role. The book contains countless details about game rules, locations on the island, lighthearted optional events, and major metaplot events that progress the story. But the vast majority of the book is taken up by character bios, each lasting around 4 pages. The reason being for this is that every player is meant to play multiple characters, whether they be player-made creations or borrowed directly from the book. In an effort to emulate the chaotic nature of the classic Forum RP, the cast of characters in this game is meant to be truly massive, and each player should be constantly swapping between a handful of them. Every character is assigned a major arcana card for mechanical reasons we'll get into later, with upright cards representing the Islander test subjects, and reversed cards representing either Feral Lab staff members or special outsider characters who have special conditions regarding their involvement. The non-classified sections include stuff like the character's gender and pronouns, sexuality, occupation, and a list of hobbies and skills, along with a short bio describing their history and personality, as well as, finally, a full-page interview with one of the 3 main doctors, giving you a chance to get into that character's head and visualize how they might interact with others. For example, let's take my personal favorite character from the book, Vasile de Rossi, a washed-up Hollywood actor and model practically born into the profession, with a reputation for being narcissistic, self-absorbed, and obsessed with his own beauty. He's lured to the island under the premise that he's taking a vacation after his latest onset scandal and a box office bomb, but in reality, the studio executives just wanted him gone. His interview is with Dr. Lockhart as she welcomes him to the island, while the entire time, Vasile is just disgusted with the fact that he's not being treated with constant first-class service. Ugh, I guess it'll have to do. Damn it, why can't I get a fucking signal out here? Sorry, the connection is pretty terrible. We can make calls from the lab for you if it's an emergency. Yes, it's an emergency! My agent could be calling me with a huge offer at any moment. Ooh, do you think it could be a leading role? Of course it's a leading role! God, I need a drink. Have one of these grunts get me a blueberry cobbler smoothie. Oh, well, we can see what the cafeteria has? Cafeteria food? My lawyer will be hearing about this! Paradise Vacation my ass! One thing I'm glad the book makes explicitly clear is that you're more than welcome to change any aspect of the character when playing your version of the game, even after that character has been introduced. See, aside from the player-made characters, any unclaimed character can be taken over by a player whenever they want. Until then, the GM plays them. Like I said, this isn't the kind of game where you're trying to desperately outwit the doctors and win. Anyone could play a handful of staff members and islanders, each with varying motivations, needs, goals, and personalities. So if changing a character's sexuality opens the door to more possibilities for your game narratively, or you're uncomfortable with a part of the character's personality as described, there's nothing wrong with changing it. I mean, heck, as the book itself says, Dr. Moreau's player may decide that they are more comfortable if the megalomaniacal doctor uses she/her pronouns. A girl boss indeed. But now, let's take a look at the confidential section of each character's bio. Here's where the really interesting stuff lies. All of this is written from the perspective of the laboratory staff, categorizing the pretense for the subjects and mission, any existing medical conditions they have, a threat level showing how seriously the lab should take containing this subject, alternate species suggestions for the character, and common behaviors displayed by them both before and throughout their transformations. However, my favorite part of this is the lab concessions and lab leverages. These are different tactics that the labs might use to get a subject to comply with their demands, with the concessions being special privileges or treatment they might grant for good behavior, and the leverages being threats they may issue if they don't comply. For example, Vasil's concessions play into his ridiculously high standards, with exclusive access to the mansion, typically reserved for high-level staff, being one of the examples given. However, his leverage is a threat to tie him up and treat him as a gilded pet for the staff, the ultimate embarrassment for someone as narcissistic as Vasil. These tools make an excellent guide for the GM, showing them how they can create drama with this particular character, forcing them to acknowledge how much they've changed or continue to allow the labs to have their way with them. This section also details the primary serum being given to that particular islander, with sketches of a few of their alternate forms if you don't want to go with their default species, as well as illustrations of each stage of the transformation, complete with a full page of their final form. The serum is distributed through 4 key injections, plus 1 preparatory one with no immediate effects, resulting in 25, 50, 75, and 100% stages of the character's new form. This is a massive part of why Vasil is my favorite character in the book, because his, or rather, her transformation is probably exactly what you could have guessed if you know my tastes. But I particularly love the way her illustrations transition I didn't even realize the joke there. Transition from the initial bout of shock and horror, slowly through to acceptance, and eventually euphoria. Vasil has been one of the characters I've been playing myself in an online campaign I'm part of, and she's by far one of the most fun to play, even before she's changed at all, in my opinion. She's actually a character taken wholesale from the original Gaia RP, giving us a direct line for comparison, since this game also comes with a full archive of all the TF art drawn for that campaign. This art is very much of the time when it comes to TF stuff, but it's still fun to look at, if only so you can have legendary pieces like Vasil's sudden boob explosion. While we're on the subject of illustrations, there's a lot of art in this book, ranging from the initial human form illustrations, the transformation stages, the Alt-TF sketches, as well as extra illustrations for various events, including small scenes of characters just hanging out, investigating the island, or committing terrible violations of privacy. Then, of course, there's the absolutely gorgeous cover art, drawn by Mel Echevarria, who is also the most prominent artist for the book. She was one of the primary artists for To Change as well, and drew the art in that game's official tarot card deck, which is just so beautiful, or unsettling, or honestly whatever you want it to be. Her style is just fantastic. Various other artists from the TF space are featured as well, including Angerboda, Black Sheep TFs, Lowaros, Strawberry TF, Arania, Fletch, Sarah Olsen, Bunka, Hi-Bye, Redacted, Michelody, Sarah Fuku, Winter Sky, Bianca Gazingan, and Snowy. Also, when I was talking with Duck to get some art to use in this video, he shared a few promotional memes they had drawn, including this one. I'm just going to let that speak for itself. It's Pride Month, Moreau. You know what that means. Huh? What? Do you want us to make, like, gay serums? What? However, with all of this talk about the book itself, the lore, and the characters, you're probably wondering how the game actually works. Well, unlike a lot of tabletop RPGs, the island of Dr. Moreau actually features no dice of any kind. Instead, the focus is entirely on role-playing as these characters. As I said, the game is designed to replicate the feel of old forum RPs, so there's actually very little mechanical structure to the game. Characters will craft the scenes that they want their characters to take place in, define how those interactions go, and play them out with minimal interruption. However, that's not to say the game has no mechanics whatsoever. Sometimes, when it's completely uncertain what'll happen in a certain interaction, there is a need for that little element of randomness, and that's where the attribute tests come into play. Attribute tests are, well, exactly what they sound like. Tests of a certain character's attributes to determine the outcome of a situation. There are 4 attributes in total: physical aptitude, physical fortitude, mental aptitude, and mental fortitude. In order to determine whether or not a character succeeds with an action, they'll draw 3 cards from the future deck, a deck containing all the major arcana of a standard tarot deck. You can also use all the face cards, jokers, and tens from a standard deck of playing cards. The player will typically draw the top 3 cards from the tarot deck, though certain situations may cause them to draw more or less, and then compare the results to this handy little table right here. Each attribute has 4 cards that qualify as a standard success, and if you drew one of these, you can go ahead and pick it to succeed in the attribute test. However, once you do, that card is removed from the deck until it's shuffled under special conditions, so it's worth considering whether succeeding at this attribute test is really worth removing that card. These tests can also be used in a contest between two player characters, in which case the victor is just whichever player selects the card with the higher number value. There are also 6 cards that have unique results, outside of just your standard successes and failures, such as Temperance, which is a failure that allows you to reshuffle the deck, Judgment, which leaves the outcome up to the GM's discretion, and the Devil, which is a success that allows the player to gain an escape point and decide an aspect of one of their character's next changes. Escape points are progressively earned by players through specific events, like at the start of a session, whenever a player character has been transformed, or when a specific card is used in an attribute test. These can be spent to automatically succeed in a test. On the other side, Dr. Moreau has 21 authority points at the start of the game, which progressively decrease throughout the game as a result of certain events occurring throughout roleplay, such as vials of serum being destroyed or wasted, or when an islander or staff member dies. As his authority ticks down, Moreau will begin acting more and more desperate, and eventually certain events will be triggered that progress the plot of the game. This mainly serves as a way for the GM to track how competent or incompetent the lab should seem at any given time, as well as telling them when to proceed on to the next metaplot event. Speaking of events, let's go ahead and dig into those. There are 3 core types of events in IODM: character events, seasonal events, and metaplot events. These serve as a sort of narrative guide for the game. When the players need guidance on what particular scene should play out, rather than being left to their own devices, character events are exactly what they sound like. Specific groups of characters with common interests or traits get together to perform a specific series of scenes over the course of a few sessions. Once these recommended scenes are all completed, special effects become active, like granting the characters extra draws on attribute tests, or escape points, or that sort of thing. For example, there's Strike Up the Band, in which some of the more musically inclined characters on the island, well, form a band. The suggested scenes are ask for instruments, host a jam session, and find a venue. And if all of these scenes are completed, as long as all the band members are on good terms, they can freely share their escape points with one another. See, it's not all doom and gloom on the island. Half the game is this more character-driven slice of life stuff, and honestly, it's so much fun to play it out. Then there's the seasonal events. These are exactly what they sound like: your island-wide surfing competitions, Halloween parties, spring cleaning. These are mainly meant as a reprieve from the ongoing storylines for some lighthearted fun, and generally only last a single session. But who's to say they don't serve as the perfect backdrop for some juicy relationship drama between some of the islanders, or one of the more rebellious subjects taking a shot at cornering one of the doctors. And finally, there's the metaplot events. There are 10 of these in total, plus an epilogue session, that make up the main storyline of the game. From the arrival of the first batch of islanders to the collapse of the lab and the final escape from the island. I won't go into too much detail on these, but they generally trigger once Moreau reaches a certain authority level, or when a majority of the islanders are at a certain stage of their transformation. These generally last for multiple sessions, and drastically change the status quo of the game in some really interesting ways. For example, one of my personal favorites is Fresh Meat, which occurs near the end of the game. Moreau brings in a new batch of test subjects, generally an amount to replace any characters who have died or otherwise become inactive throughout the course of the game. These can be another round of custom characters created by the players, or any of the Fresh Meat characters defined in the book, with no specific arcana tied to them. These were actually backer designed characters, and with some of them, you can definitely tell, but I'm far from complaining. This event comes with a whole new set of drama, being, who's gonna give the newbies the talk? Who's gonna tell them what's really going on here? What they're going to become? It's so ripe for drama, it makes me want to squeal. In some of the online campaigns I've been in, we've had a rolling join basis where people can join whenever they want, so giving people the talk has been like a major thing throughout it. It's been so much fun. Now, with as wide of a cast of characters as the island of Dr. Moreau is meant to have, you might wonder how the players pace themselves when it comes to introducing new faces. Because, of course, you don't want to suddenly bombard people with a bunch of new characters right from the get-go. Well, the game starts with the players' custom characters arriving on the island, with the Book Islander sharing their arcana as their duplex mate. It's implied that most of the other characters are already present at this point, the players just haven't encountered them yet. So, whenever the players want to introduce a new character, you'll draw another card from the future deck, and find the corresponding character from the book. Then, the GM will take control of them initially, and throughout the course of roleplay, at any point, any player can stake a claim on that character. As soon as they do, control passes over to them. They can do this for as many characters as they'd like, but realistically, I've seen that most players only take 3 or 4 each. You might wonder how drawing for specific characters works, when the other function of the future deck is aptitude checks, and that relies on cards being removed from play once they're used. And here's the genius part of it, at least in my opinion. See, instead of discarding those cards altogether, you actually return them to the deck face up, rather than face down. That way, you can ignore the face up cards when drawing for attribute tests, but still be able to draw any arcana when it comes to the character draws. Speaking of draws, the transformations are actually determined by this as well. See, at the beginning of each session after the first, the GM will draw 3 tarot cards from the future deck, ignoring ones for characters who received an injection the previous session. Whichever characters are represented by those particular tarot are marked as ready for their next injection. However, that doesn't necessarily mean they're automatically injected and transformed. No. How that scene plays out is up to you and the player, of course. Maybe their duplex is gassed and they're injected in their sleep. This is how most of the first changes are handled. Or maybe they're invited directly to the labs with a daunting 48-hour time limit. Maybe a character has a delayed reaction to the serum and changes in public in front of a bunch of people. Or maybe they change immediately upon waking up or in the labs under the scrutiny of the staff. Regardless, these changes are nearly always a traumatic event for the characters involved, unless they're one of the few characters that actually wants the transformation, in which case they're often still painful, but without a doubt some of the biggest turning points in those characters' stories. Now, that covers just about everything in regards to the game's setup and mechanics. The game also comes packaged with a full-sized map image of the island, a shipping chart, and a 10-song soundtrack with songs like character themes for the 3-head doctors, casual themes for the duplexes, and whatnot. These songs are composed by 3 musicians, namely Cheesy Dino, Roscoe TF, and Bilex. The songs are pretty ambient, not super my style to listen to outside of a game, but they have provided a good backing for when we've been running it. So they do their job pretty well. So what does actual play look like? Well, there are 2 primary ways to play the game. The first, as the book describes from the get-go, is as a traditional tabletop RPG, with your 3 to 4 hour sessions and vocal roleplay, but the book also contains rules for another method, online text roleplay in the same vein as the original Gaia Online RP. This is actually how I was first exposed to the game myself, and genuinely, it's been some of the best RPG experiences I've ever had in my life. Now, at this point in the video, I was originally going to launch into a brief recap of the first few weeks of that online game I was a part of, but I'm going to be honest with you all. This video has been in the pipeline since last fall and is barely making it out as it is. And you can probably tell that by the fact that I'm using an entirely different microphone to record this section 4 months later. So, for the sake of my mental health, I'm going to leave it here. That said, I wouldn't be opposed to gushing about these campaigns in a dedicated future video if there's enough demand for it. But one additional thing I'd like to add is that in the time since I recorded that original script, the island of Dr. Moreau has actually received 2 official reskins, with a ton more fan-made ones either already out or in the works. These take these standard rules and mechanics of IODM and expand them out into new settings and types of transformations. The first of these is Voyage to Brazil, a gothic reskin which I actually got to help playtest. In this setting, the transformations are much more magical in nature, and are primarily based around classic horror monsters and mythical creatures. So, your vampires and werewolves, unicorns, fairies, there's a questing beast in there, and a kitsune, which I am totally not biased toward. As for the other reskin, Escape from Planet Aeya, it's a sci-fi reskin based more so around fucked up alien transformation, and those changes get a lot more bizarre compared to some of the other versions of the game. I personally will probably never touch this reskin just due to the fact that some of the changes lean a lot more into body horror, and some of the default ones are homages to horror movies that scarred me because I saw clips at way too young of an age, but if that's your thing, go nuts, I guess. That all said, thank you so much to everyone who contributed to making these games possible, whether it be in the writing, the art, the music, or any other aspect of it, and to everyone who's been a player or GM in any of the games I've been a part of. You all have a really special community you've built up here, and I cannot wait to see it keep growing, with more of the reskins and whatever other projects you all move on to from here. I now have an eye out for pretty much any and all transformation-themed role-playing games, thanks to you folks, and I doubt this will be the last time I talk about it here on my channel. Before I go though, just a few quick things I'd like to get out there. First off, I'd like to extend a massive thank you to friend of the channel Leilani Wilson for the new channel theme, Groove Storm, which you probably heard at the beginning of the video, or over on my Twitch channel, or now, you're hearing it now. Genuinely, I've been listening to Layla's work in some form since I was literally 14, so having her compose the theme for my channel is honestly kind of a dream come true, and I cannot thank her enough. Layla, if you're watching, just know that you are one of the coolest people I have ever met, and thank you, once again, for all the amazing art you make, music and otherwise. In other news, I am back to streaming semi-frequently on my Twitch channel. Check the pinned post on my Blue Sky account or on my Discord server for exact times. Both of those are linked in the description. And if you want to check out some of the VODs of those streams, then I'd recommend subscribing to my new second channel, Kit the Demigoddess, where I'll be posting all of those VODs in the future. There, you can check out the Deltarune streams that are pretty much almost entirely me gushing about IODM early on, so there's that. With that said, that'll be all for today. Thank you all for tuning in. Remember to like, subscribe, hype the video, all the normal jazz. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.